She wrote lots of them. Like, I mean, lots and lots of them. Oh, yeah.
You mean I wrote lots
Right.
of my own books?
Yes.
Several of them I wrote.
Yes. Right. And they had stickers on them. And everybody knew your name. Everybody knew your name. And you just kept writing books and being more productive, and every book was as wonderful as the one before. And I, of course, in the year 4 on the King of Atolia or something like this, right? And you wanted to interview me, so I said, you know what? Why don't we have a conversation?
Yeah, that's right.
Then instead of you interviewing me, we will just have a conversation. So that's what we're doing here, is we're restaging our conversation. Only back then we talked a lot about children. And we talked about clothes. We did, and that's the thing that I wanted to bring up, because both Shannon and I discussed the fact that we felt like we ought to be at least 6 inches taller, and possibly float 4 inches off the ground, and that, you know,
We were wanting a cloak.
right, and that's when capes came up, and we agreed that, you know, we really felt like as authors, our wardrobe was underrepresenting, and we both agreed.
You want to arrive somewhere like,
Right? Like Maleficent. Yeah. Totally. Right? Okay. I just want you to know, and I haven't told you this before, that since then, my mother has given me all of her capes. And the next time we're both at Y'all West, I'm going to make them have an author fashion show, and I'm going to bring all of my capes, and I'm going to make everybody take pictures. You know, Maleficent? My mother has a full-length, sleeveless velvet cape with a hood with black ostrich feathers.
your mother had a full length.
No, I do. And this was my plan for the author fashion show, is that we would have all of the authors, and of course, ultimately they would get a chance to wear the cape, but otherwise they'd all just come out in their pajamas. Yeah.
She mentions Y'all West, which is a young adult book festival in Santa Monica where we were recently, because it's really like the most likely place where you would have an author fashion show, because it's like the most random. Like, you just don't, other festivals you do, like,
this is what you get when you let the authors organize the festival.
It's the only author organized festival, I think. Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's like
Y'all Fest was the original one in Charleston, and those authors clearly were having such a good time that the authors on the West Coast became terribly jealous, and they started a sister organization.
And there's like 150 amazing authors who go. And at other festivals, you may be in a panel to discuss what's the difference between middle grade and young adult, or how to develop characters, or things like that. And at Y'all West, literally, my events were author truth and dare, which was just, it was literally, we just played truth or dare on the stage. And most of them involved my husband doing feats of strength. Like, and the first time we did it, he gave Dave Barry the piggyback ride of his life. He was so thrilled. It's become a thing now. Dane should be here. You get a piggyback. Oh, you didn't get one at Y'all West. I pimp him out. I'm like, you guys want a piggyback ride? My husband will give you a piggyback ride. And you're like, you're creeping me out. Get away. But I've got pictures of him giving like 20 different authors piggyback ride. I'm gonna do a Tumblr called Piggyback Writer.
Nice.
Okay.
That's going to be awesome. No, I was going to say that what impressed me most about Y'all West was you did a live-action skit this year. Was that Harry Potter?
No, I didn't do that. No. Did someone do that? We did Storyball.
Right. No. At SmackDown. You were out there. You were on the stage. She blanked it out. She was trying to forget. Yes.
Yeah, because obviously what people want to see when they go to a book festival is for me and Brendan Reichs to do a reenactment of the forest scene from Twilight. And I was like, I'm doing this, but I'm playing Edward. And I sparkled. And we didn't get to see it in advance. We just read it right there on the spot. It was beautiful. It was touching. Anywho, so you're a writer, I hear. You do books?
I write books.
Honestly, it's hard to talk about Megan's books because those of you who have read any of them know that there's like so full of spoilers, right? It's like she's the spoiler queen. You don't know the spoilers coming until you're like, oh, there it is. It's like your M. Night Shyamalan, but like consistently good. Did I say his name right? Yeah, but I love that about your stuff. Do you know in advance that you're going to be tricksy like that, or do you feel pressure to be tricksy, or is it just come naturally? You're a tricksy person.
I think it mostly comes naturally that I'm a tricksy person, but I will say that when I sit down to write, I do know exactly where the plot is going. You know, we can talk about outlining and pantsing, but I'm not either. What I usually do, you guys are familiar with the Samuel Taylor Coleridge poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, right? Where the wedding guest just desperately would like to go get something to eat, and he's backed into the corner by a very strange person who lays his hand on the arm and then tells him this long story. Well, this is what I do to my husband. You know,
Albatross around your neck.
all the time. Yeah. Right.
He's like, he sees you coming. He's like, oh, she's got the albatross.
She's wearing the albatross. I gotta go to a conference in Tunis because only that would be far enough away. And then I start to eye the children. In fact, there was one point where I wrote a story called "The Baby in the Night Deposit Box." Yes, well, I was telling my oldest about it, and he said, "Yeah, I know this story. I've heard it before." And I thought he meant somewhere else. And I'm like, oh, this is so embarrassing. This must be that cryptamnesia thing where you read something and you forget that you read it, and years later you write it again, and then people look at you like, what kind of evil, plagiarizing, horrible person are you? And then he's like, yeah, Mom, you told me this one. I'm like, oh, goodness, it's me. I told it to him. It's okay. Yes. But the best version of this story is that it's not always my husband and it's not always my children. At one point, it was my two editors, Virginia Duncan, who's my editor now, and Susan Hirschman, who was my first editor and since retired and turned the very difficult job over to Virginia, and she puts up with me. And I had just figured out how I could fix problems I'd been having with the King of Atolia. And they had come to a conference, ALA or something like that in San Francisco, and they took me out to lunch. And they said, so, how's the King of Atolia going? And it was like, they had no idea. Okay, so like 2.5 hours later, the people are not just taking the napkins and the tablecloths and the silverware off the tables around us, they're literally picking the tables up and stacking them in front of the cafe doors because it's time to go. Yeah, and then I finished, and then we could go back to the conference.
So that's like you just get it out by telling people about it,
Right.
and then you start writing, or do you do that all throughout the process?
No, I pretty much get that whole thing out in that, because I know if I've gotten the reactions that I wanted when I was telling the story to somebody, then I can go and start writing them all down, hopefully to get the same reactions out of print, which is a lot harder. You know, I talk about how when you're telling the story, you wave your hand and you say things like, oh, and she's really pissed, but she believes him, right? And this motion just takes care of everything. There is no written equivalent.
In my graphic novels, it's all just text and occasionally a hand.
Actually, I'm really very curious about that. When you're working on a graphic novel, what does your part look like?
It's kind of like a screenplay. It's kind of like a screenplay.
So do you say things like, I would like an up-close look? You know, a close-up shot of a tragically unhappy little Shannon, right?
Half of the illustration directions were that exact thing. Close-up shot of unhappy Shannon. She was like, I can do that. So the way I do it, there's a lot more than one way to write a graphic novel script, but the way I do it is I do it panel by panel. And a panel is the square or rectangle in a graphic novel. And so I describe what's going on in it, who's in it, what's happening. and then put whatever dialogue or whatever's in it. And I do it that way because graphic novels are a really challenging medium, and it's much harder than, say, film, because you don't have soundtrack, you don't have motion, you don't have movement, and so I have to try to visualize, could what I'm asking the illustrator to do be represented and communicated in a static image? And so I do it panel by panel to make sure that what I'm asking could be done that way. But some of them I give very vague descriptions because I want her to come in and do her magic. And other times, like you say, I know I want to be close up here, or I want an aerial shot here. So sometimes I do kind of give camera shots and angles.
I don't think I could do that. I think there would be a lot of hand waving. You know, I can, right, exactly. I'd be talking to the illustrator like, and then, yeah.
And then do something, you know.
Right. How did you start with graphic novels then? You started with words like a writer.
Yeah. So my husband grew up reading comic books. Anyone comic book readers? Yes, quite a few. I was not growing up. I didn't have that. I thought it was a boy's thing, and I didn't have access to it. It was one of those things that just was not in my realm. And then he got me reading, and I fell in love into it. It's just as an alternate storytelling medium. I love there's so many different kinds of storytelling that I love, like music and theater and all these things. So it was like a cool other storytelling medium. But then as I wrote Goose Girl, which is a pretty thick book, and Anna Burning, which is a pretty thick book, and I started going around and meeting kids, and the mom would say, "This child loves your book." And there would be another child there who did not pipe up, and the mother would say, "He or she's not really a reader." And that was, every kid's a reader. They just don't have the right book. And I know so many kids are visual learners, and I wish that we had more visual books. At that time, children's publishers were not making graphic novels for kids, and DC and Marvel and stuff were not a focus on kids either. So we thought we would write one, and we would pitch it to DC and Marvel, and we couldn't get in there. We couldn't finagle it. But eventually a publisher said we would do it, and we were like, really? And now it's graphic novels has been the biggest change in children's literature in the last 10 years. I could go on about graphic novels for literally 2 hours about why they're so great and important, but I love them.
I'm just curious, when you started doing them, did you jump right into that camera angle business? Or did you get some sort of training for that? Are you as multi-talented as you appear, Shannon? Because I'm not sure I'm okay with that.
I get bored easily, and so if a book doesn't seem like it's harder than what I'm capable of, or if it doesn't seem like I don't know how to write this, then I'm not actually really interested in writing it. So I am always trying to learn new things. I've written in so many different genres, and I've written from, early chapter books, middle grade, young adult, and for adult, and across the spectrum, and it's not about talent, it's just about boredom. So I'm always jumping around. So I did a lot of research.
Sure, it's not about talent.
Also, it's about talent. I don't know what it's about. I'm bored. I can't be Megan Whalen Turner. Obviously, if I had a choice, I'd like that one, please. I don't know how you do what you do. What kind of mystical wizardry you conjure up. I read your book. I'm reading Thick as Thieves, and I'm like, I love every single word of this so much. Why? Why do I love every single word of what you write? Answer the question, Megan.
I put it all down to programming. Yeah, there's subliminal messages in the feed. And after people read the first one, they really don't have any choice. Many of them would like to go on to live fruitful lives doing something besides waiting for me to produce the next. But unfortunately, they're all of them, as you can see, trapped in a holding pattern. Sometimes for years at a time. Yeah. So in my defense, one of the things that I think is really important when I'm writing is that I like to give people a book that has a beginning and a middle and a satisfying ending, because I cannot really imagine what would happen if you guys came to the end of The Thickest Thieves. Right,
in 2027.
Exactly. Right. Are you familiar with the author Avi? right? And evidently he like stuck one of his main characters in a barrel at some point. It was the end of the book, and he had to wait until the next book came out to find out how and when or if he got out of a barrel. And I can only imagine if I like stuck Jen in a barrel. I mean, there are a lot of people who would probably like to stick Jen in a barrel, but if I stuck Jen in a barrel and then ended the book, people would know where I live. Right. So seeing as how I do take so long, and I do envy you, and I envy your ability to work in so many different genres, and I really envy your ability to stay on task because you've really blown my biggest excuse for not being able to write faster, which is that I have 3 children, but I'm standing next to Shannon who has 4. So yeah, thanks for that.
I want you to know that I tried. Like, what year was it when I was like, let's be writing buddies, and we will email each other every day with our writing goals, and then we will check in with each other at the end of the week to see if we reach those goals. And this partly was for me a selfish thing. It was like, I want to make sure she's writing so I can get the next class. And we did it for a while. I mean, we kind of did it for a while. Did it make any difference?
Made a huge difference. It was immensely helpful, actually. No, it was immensely helpful, and this is, and it was also really helpful that my children, I told you, children, that my children were old enough that I instituted a new writing program, which was, I'm going to the cafe. And I'm not returning until writing has happened. And I don't care how long it takes. And so I would sit at the cafe and I would come in and I would buy my latte at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And sometimes at like 7, I was still sitting there because I had told myself, Shannon expects a workshop. And I am not leaving until I have written something so that I can tell Shannon at the end of the week that I wrote it. And then I would say, Shannon, I made my word count.
What? Did I not respond?
Crickets. Well, no, you had 4 children, Shannon. I don't know if you remember, you were a little busy.
That's the problem with this plan. There was a key problem in this plan, which is I'm really bad at emailing and also answering the phone. We have a home phone, and we haven't checked the messages, the voicemail on it, since I think it was like August of 2012 or something.
We just got rid of the phone.
That's an option. Only reason why I keep it is for emergencies, so the kids could call 911. I mean, really, I just want a red phone that goes directly to 911. That's the only thing I would need, because I don't actually answer phone calls. Or
We told them to go to the neighbors.
oh, that's a good idea. Okay, maybe we could do that. Yeah. So the whole emailing thing, it was a good idea.
It worked. It totally worked. I mean,
Yeah. I remember when you.
oh my gosh, of course. She's like, was it Thick as Thieves? Because I've done 4 books since then. Yes, it was Thick as Thieves, Shannon.
Because I remember you saying that you'd written this whole story, but you were sure that that's not what anybody wanted, and you were going to talk to your agent or editor about it, and like maybe everybody wants another Jen story, so maybe they're not going to want this one. And so I wasn't ever sure if that was the one we were working on simultaneously, or if you had actually set one aside and.
Yeah, everything indicated that I should probably just skip this book and go on to the next one. And I really thought about it. And I thought it was the really sensible thing to do. But I couldn't get past this one. So, I have a one-track mind. And I couldn't move on to the next one.
And all of us have spoilery questions for her.
No. You know I wouldn't answer them anyway.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's true.
so for those of you who don't know, there are a number of people here from the live journal site Soonest, and they know this best. They're largely the reason for my not telling policy. Sometime between the publication of The Queen of Atolia and The King of Atolia, I started to see people online talking about my books. And back in the last century, when I wrote The Thief, an author only knew what a reader was thinking if they worked for the New York Times, or if they wrote down their thoughts on the bodies of dead trees and mailed them to you, right? Which honestly didn't happen very often. And then at about the time The Thief came out, Amazon sprang into being, and they started to publish online reviews, and people started to have blogs, and they interviewed you. But also they wrote reviews on their blogs, and for the first time, sort of ordinary, everyday readers got to have a voice in the conversation about books, which was awesome because I could lurk, and I was self-Googling like a maniac at that time, right? And I'm watching these people thinking, I've written this book and I don't know if anybody noticed this, and maybe this was too obvious, and maybe this was really stupid, and maybe I'm the only person who thought this was funny, and that sort of thing. And I actually got to watch, I was like the first generation of writers to be able to watch readers in action. And what I realized when I was watching them is they saw everything. They noticed everything. They pointed out everything to each other. They were having a great time having a conversation in which I absolutely did not need to participate. And that if I did participate, all I would do is short circuit it completely. And instead of talking about what does this mean, or what does that mean, or how do you think that happened, it would always be, well, Megan said. Megan said. So when they wrote me a fan letter with like 27 questions, it was like 14 pages long, and they said, could you answer that? The answer to probably 75% of the questions was, I'm sorry, I'm not telling. I'm not telling. I'm not telling. I'm not telling. So it's always rather tricky when people come and they want to know, for instance, how old is Jen? And the answer is, it's up to you guys. And it's been a beautiful thing to see, because what I find usually is that 10-year-olds think he's 12, and 12-year-olds think he's 14, and 14-year-olds think he's 17, and 35-year-olds think he's 20.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And I did the same thing. Like, people always wanted more information. What did this mean? What did you mean here? What is the character doing now? They want to ask. And I decided I wasn't going to do that because I saw the same thing. I saw these wonderful, smart readers taking up their book and deciding for themselves all the unanswered questions. Because if you answer all of it, that would be really boring, for one thing. And then it doesn't leave any space, any breathing room for a reader to come in. And so I decided I wasn't going to ever do anything, answer those kinds of questions. However, that doesn't mean I don't want to ask you those questions. And I want to know about the wine merchant, right? Don't you want to know? Yeah. I'm just saying. That's not a spoiler for people who haven't read it. I'm just saying. I just have a question about that. Oh, you just did! You totally just answered it! You know what it is? Your weakness is the hands. Those are the words, but when the hand gets in there. Okay, that's what I thought. I suspected. See, I'm smart. I didn't need you to answer it. I figured it out. Oh, okay. Yeah, do you guys have any questions for Megan? Yes. Yes, dinosaur hand. As he's known in the wilds.
Okay, so do your characters live in your head and they just do everything that you want them to do, or do they act out?
So she says, do your characters live in your head and they do what you want them to do, or do they act out on their own?
Sometimes I run internal movies, usually when I should be doing something else. You know, washing dishes, laundry. I'm watching internal movies in the kitchen. Right. And sometimes I do feel like I'm watching them act things out entirely on their own. And really, it's more like if you set up all of the dominoes, it's not really surprising when you knock one down that all of the other ones fall down as well. So lots of times what I'm doing with characters is I'm setting up the characters like winding little toys, and then I put them down and I start them moving, and then I get to stand there and watch something that I set up, but that I nevertheless find really entertaining. Every once in a while, I paint myself into a corner where I need something to happen plot-wise. Does this happen to you too? Yeah, you need something to happen plot-wise, and you can't quite figure out what combination of events is reasonably going to lead towards that thing happening. The biggest problem that I... Spoilers. Sorry. There was an event in the second book. And those of you who've read the second book are going to know exactly what event that is.
The event.
Right, and that event was actually hard to justify given somebody who is exceptionally practical and would not necessarily have been so angry she did something that stupid, right? And it took a little while to manage that character, those characters, to actually get that event to seem plausible. And I think it was plausible because people kept reading the next book, so.
One of the most extraordinary events I've ever read in a book. And then from that to the end.
That's just because you haven't heard of George R. Martin yet.
No, he doesn't hold a candle to you. He's not my style. He's not my style. I read the first book, and there was just too much. Never mind. There's a mixed audience here. I mean, children-wise. Right. There was too much of something for me. Anyway, but anyway, that event in Queen of Atolia, and then with the end of the book, what happens? That whole thing. I mean, if you want to be a writer, just reread that book over and over again and be like, what?
I just want to know how dumb we look. Among the bushes.
We're hiding in the bushes, waving our hands around. We work with words for a living. Does anyone have questions for Megan? Yeah, way in the back.
What's your favorite part of being an author?
Favorite part of being
Meeting Shannon Hale.
I was expecting you to like hug me and then say, the fan.
Yeah, no. Sorry, guys. No, you really, you get to actually meet some really amazing people and like go to dinner with them. It's really pretty stunning. And Y'all West was just like a barrel full of amazing people. I backed Linda Sue Park into one of those circular benches, right, in the restaurant at the after party, and there was a baby on one side of her, so she couldn't escape, and I was on the other side. Right, and I'm like, you're not getting away.
It's crazy because they have these the author only parties, and you walk in and there's 150 people who are like amazing, and you want to talk to everybody, and everybody there thinks you're amazing, and it's just like everybody's just like gushing over everybody all night. And guacamole as well. All right, other questions? Yeah.
So I have a question about something you said like 4 years ago. And you may not answer this.
Have I mentioned my memory?
But if you don't answer this, then when I come through the signing line, just write the answer in the So you were here for
on online news site.
She'll burn it in front of you.
I don't.
You wouldn't tell her.
I'm
Right, I can trust you.
She can keep a secret.
Just not with my writing.
So you were at LTUE, we were the keynote. So we blocked, and I read all of your books like the week before, and I was enamored. But so you said that you were working on the next book, Conspiracy, had just come out, and you said that you had started it, but you realized that you were writing it from the wrong character's point of view, and you had to write it from a different character's point of view. Now, is that because
Did I say character's point of view, or did I just say point of view?
maybe you just said point of view?
Because I
thing, I wrote, yelling, yelling now. I wrote the whole thing in third person,
Okay.
and I had to throw it all away and start over again in first.
That's what we've been debating for the last 4.5 years. I mean, what that was what.
Yeah, it was this one, and I'm gonna be long-winded. Sorry. The Thick as Thieves was originally meant to be the second half of The King of Atolia. And then the King of Atolia grew to be like this enormous book all by itself, and I was either going to have to write something the size of like a cinder block, or I was going to have to divide it into 2 books. So I thought, that's okay. I will write The King of Atolia, and then I'll write the second half as a separate book. And then I went and I wrote something completely different because I was worried about that main character for Conspiracy of Kings. He'd been off on his own for a really long time, and originally everything that happened to him was supposed to happen off stage. He was going to be on the middle of the stage, and then he was going to go away, and he was going to come back completely different. It was going to be great. It's going to be absolutely awesome. And I realized, yeah, no, that's not going to work. People are going to have no idea who this person is. And they're going to be like, what happened to the little wimpy guy? So I wrote A Conspiracy of Kings, and then I came back to this, and I wrote it in third person, because King of Atolia had been in third person, and I realized it was a terrible mistake, and threw it out. The book, though, the more I go on with these books, the more I feel like I'm really just writing an enormous homage to Rosemary Sutcliffe, who is one of my favorite authors ever. And in The Eagle of the Night, let me start by saying she was a British author. I read her books while I was growing up. She wrote the kind of books that she wanted to read when she was a child in the hospital for long periods of time, because she had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. And back then, all the boys would have been in one ward and all the girls would have been in a different ward, and Kidnapped and Treasure Island and that sort of thing were over here in the boys' ward, and Pollyanna and Five Little Peppers and How They Grew and all of those books were in the girls' ward. And she would have to find a nice nurse who was willing to go steal the books off the shelf in the boys' ward and bring them over to her. So she grew up to be a painter. For a little while, she did miniature portraits. And then, sort of in a freak accident where a family friend said, hey, can you write a book for me? She wrote a book, and it became wildly successful. And she had a great career writing children's books. And in The Eagle of the Night, she has this newly minted centurion. He's just come to Britain. He's just been promoted. He's really full of himself. He's very excited. And he has a plan laid out. He is going to be a soldier for 20 years. He's going to get his veteran's pension. And he's going to go back to Italy. And he's going to buy back the family farm. And like by page 37, he's been in his first battle. His leg has been so badly broken that he might walk, but he will never be a soldier again. And yeah, George R. R. Martin hadn't happened yet. And nobody knew the phrase plot armor yet. But when I was reading this, I knew that this sort of thing does not happen to the main character. This is supposed to happen to the sidekick or something. But it just didn't happen in any of the books that I read when I was growing up. And it made me wonder for the first time just who gets to be the main character in the adventure story. Do they have to be perfect? Right? Do they have to be clear of eye and strong of limb in order to be a worthy main character? Do they have to be noble? Do they have to be good? Do they have to be honest and stoic and all of these things? And I knew when I was writing The King of Atolia, this was going to be the second half, and that I was going to be revisiting this story, and that I wanted to concentrate on Kemet. What I didn't know until I wrote the whole thing and had it published and was like on the author tour, that possibly back then when I was writing about that guy with the bad impulse control, in the very first book, that maybe even back then I was considering just how perfect do you have to be in order to be the main character in your adventure story. Because Mr. No Impulse Control is not exactly a perfect example of your mainstream hero from the books of my childhood.
There was a little nod to that centurion in Thick of Thieves. Those soldiers that they met, and one of them had come from somewhere else and was going to have that very plan. Okay. Yeah, in the white shirt, yeah.
Are the names of the countries on the small peninsula invariant, or do they vary with the gender of the ruler? Because we have Edis ruled by a queen who goes by that name, Sunas ruled by a king who goes by that name, Atolia ruled by a queen who goes by that name. So would those change at all if the gender of the principal ruler changed?
So if
You don't think
if
so?
Atolia was ruled by a king, would he still be called Atolia?
No, would the country be called Atolus?
No.
Would the country? So the
No,
country.
the country is always Atolia.
Okay.
So why is it?
But the way that you refer what you call the king and queen, it wouldn't change based on the gender of the monarch. Well, the Atolus is the king of Atolia.
Yes, but the country
and
still has
Atolia
the same
is the
name.
queen of Atolia.
Yeah.
But the name of the country is always Atolia. I never explain things. And Edis is the name of the country. And when Helen became queen, she should have been Edya. And she said in a direct contravention of tradition that she would be Edis.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that in a short story, so I
Right.
started wondering. And
Right. But mostly the names stay the same, except for when they don't.
Okay, well, thank you.
But I haven't gotten to that bit yet.
Yeah.
What?
Let's see, maybe we could do 2 more questions. Oh, way in the back, go ahead.
Once you do start writing, how many drafts do you go through before publication?
It's hard to say because what I usually do, pantsing and outlining, we never did have that part of the discussion. Are you a pantser or an outliner? Yeah. I'm a sketcher. So after I've tormented somebody for 2.5 hours by telling them the entire story, what I do is I sit down and I write a rough sketch of the whole thing, which is usually about half the length of the finished book. And then I go to the front of that, and then I work my way all the way towards the back, at least in theory. And then I do that multiple times until I'm pretty happy with it, and then it tends to go into a drawer for a little while. And then I get it out, and I have a little bit more distance, and then I keep doing that over and over and over again. But they're very rarely broken off separately as drafts. I might say, 2 or 3 times they go into the drawer, and if you would call that a draft, then they're like 3 drafts. But if you want to know how many times do I start at the beginning and go through to the end, 30, 40 times? I don't know. And I do have a little problem making it all the way to the end. I have a tendency to get to like the last chapter and then realize I just have to go back to the beginning.
All right, last question. Yes. What do you get when you get to writer's block?
I go to the cafe, and I sit at the cafe, and nothing happens until writing happens. And when people ask me about advice about writing, one of the things that I say is that life keeps giving you more and more and more things that you really ought to get done. And if you always think of writing as that thing that you will do when you are done with everything else, you will never get anything written. And so I was very lucky that that when I needed to write The Thief, I had children. I had a child. He was very cute. But he was about 15 months old, and my husband was also writing a book. His was an academic book, but it's still a book. And we both agreed that you could do a lot of things with a toddler. You could do the dishes, you could do the laundry, you could clean the house, you could go buy groceries, you could do so many things with a toddler, but you could not write with one. And so when the baby would wake up in the morning, my husband would put him on the back of a bicycle and bicycle away to the cafe for 2 or 3 hours. And in that period of time, the only thing I was supposed to be doing was writing. If he came home and found out that while he had the baby, I was doing the dishes, it was not a good thing, it was a very bad thing, right? This was not the time to do the laundry. You get no points in heaven for doing the laundry during writing time. And I wrote that first sketch of The Thief in about 8 weeks. And The Thief was polished and ready to go to the publisher by Christmas of that year. That's how fast I could write once upon a time. So I know a lot of people who could be writing, but they always think there's something else they need to get done before they write. And I always tell people the only way you're going to get writing done is if you say, this is the period of time in which nothing else is allowed to happen. And if no writing happens, no writing happens. But nothing else gets to happen. So on those days when I'm at the cafe, there is no dinner made, there is no laundry done, the books that are overdue don't go back to the library, and these are just the sacrifices we all make so that Mom gets her writing done.
The library is actually a bookstore for us because we just end up purchasing everything we check out. Just by default, for a much higher price than we would have if we bought it at the bookstore. But you're supporting the library. That's what we tell ourselves. That's what we tell ourselves too. I'm like, as I'm paying $25 for a paperback, I'm like, but it's supporting the library. A few things I would just say quickly about writer's block. Writer's block is often the fear of not being able to write perfectly. So you need to get rid of that fear and write crap. If you allow yourself to write crap, you can always write crap, right? You could, if you have to sit down and you have to write 1,000 words right now, it doesn't matter what they are, you could do it, right? It's just that fear of getting it right. So this thing I said one time that went viral online is that it's a pretty famous saying that I said that makes, I don't know, I put these words together and people liked them. I don't know if you know that about me. That's why I said that. Anyway, there's like 20 memes. I'm serious. It's legit. Anyway, but when I'm writing a first draft, I'm reminding myself that I'm just shoveling sand into a box so that later I can build castles. And as many people have pointed out, sometimes they go back, they try that and they go back to the box and they found that the cat has used it as you would often look. Yeah, you go back and you might add it, it's actually crap, but you know. So allowing for your visions. I would also say calling it writer's block gives it power, because that's not really a thing. Like with other professions, you don't say when it gets hard that it's blocked. If it, like someone said, if a plumber doesn't know how to solve a problem, they don't call it plumber's block.
No, they do. It's a block.
It's this like magical
They do
phrase,
call it
like
that.
it's a thing, you know, instead of just saying it's hard sometimes. And I would also say give yourself credit for the time you spend thinking. Writing isn't only hands on the keyboards. Sometimes you're just working through stuff in your brain, and that counts too. Sometimes you're standing in the kitchen watching internal movies. It's great. My poor kids are always like, they would see that over and over again. Yeah. Mom. Yeah. Mom. And I'm gone. I don't even hear it. I'm not ignoring them on purpose. I'm just,
Fire.
yeah. I'm not getting nowhere. That's not going to get through. I remember like. Scissors. Gosh, the things they can get away with. It took Dean a while to figure out what was going on. I remember one time when we had a young child who was saying, he's been calling your name for like 10 minutes. And he thought I was like on purpose ignoring him. I was like, what? Huh? And I was like, he was like 5 feet away. It was like we're in the same room, but I was somewhere else, Anyway. If you guys have more questions for Megan, I'm sure she would be glad to ignore them at the table. If they're of spoiler nature. And I am not in charge of this, so do you want to give them directions for signing? We just want to say real quick, thank you to King's English. By having an independent bookstore.